Welcome everyone to the Tulsa.net user group. Tonight we got Richard Lander talking about .NET 8 container improvements. Richard, it's just awesome to have you here. Greatly appreciate it. It was awesome to meet you at the MVP Summit. And like I've said, I've read many of your blogs and have seen you on videos and stuff. And it's just great to pick your brain when I was able to, and now get you to speak to my group. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to hand this over to you and let you take it away from here.
Great, thanks, Sean. It was also good to meet you recently as well. That was a fun time. So Sean asked me to come to this user group, and I thought talking about containers would make sense, both because containers remain super popular. That's one of the main topics that I work on the .NET team, and we also have done a lot of work on them. It seems like at every release we do a fair bit of work, but I think this .NET 8 release is particularly special. So let's get into it. So just a super quick introduction. So these are the things that I work on. Those are my handles on the socials, and so I work on the kind of low level. I'm probably the most low-level product manager on the team, and so I work on the things that most people don't even really realize are features, but trust me, you've used my stuff. This is a link to a bunch of material about containers, so feel free to check that out. So I thought we'd quickly go through a quick primer just to bring everyone up to speed. I'm going to go through this relatively quickly. So Docker is the company. You'll see your heel here, and Moby is like an open source project that Docker is built on top of. You'll hear this term OCI a fair bit. That's basically the open specs for all the container land. And then there's the other stuff that you're probably familiar with. I like this sentence that I wrote because it really helps clarify. So an image, if you're familiar with Windows, with executables, an image is to an exe as a container is to a process. So that helps you understand what images are versus containers, because you hear those used somewhat interchangeably. More terminology. So repository is where the images are stored. An image is the actual artifact that you kind of push or pull. A digest is very similar to a git commit hash. So it's like an address to an image that never changes. A tag is a human readable thing, which then points to a digest. Okay. Container architecture. So containers contain the user mode OS and all the things you need for your app to run. The kernel is actually the host kernel. So that's shared by all the containers running on that particular machine. Containers are not a sandbox or a security boundary as much as people like to sometimes think they are. Basically, they're a super isolated process on a machine. Container images, they must match the architecture of the machine that they're running on, or they'll rely on emulation. And all of this is going to kind of be relevant for the rest of the talk. And then container images are a set of layers. So if I build my app and then you build your app and it's using the same .NET base images, the actual effective container is actually mostly the same. It's just the pieces on top that are different. And then in terms of what we do for .NET, so we produce images, several varieties of images. We produce them for Alpine, Azure Linux, Debian, Ubuntu, and then several variants of Windows Server. And then we produce them for AMD 64, ARM32, ARM64. So AMD 64, that's the same as x64, but in container land, we use this AMD 64 nomenclature. And then we have automation that, including when we're sleeping, my team is sleeping, it notices that like the Alpine images have been updated on Docker Hub. and then it rebuilds our images on top of them, repushes them without a human in the loop. And so we basically have approximately a 12-hour SLA on repushing. So it means that if there's been like a security update in those images, then in like, you know, Alpine or Debian or Ubuntu, our images get pushed really quickly. That puts you in a good position. Okay. Okay, so that was the quick primer. And now we'll actually go into the meat of the topic. So yeah, so publishing, well, I'll just say a few things about this. The act of building and publishing container images is something people have been doing now for about a decade. The current system totally works, but it could also be improved. So the problem to be solved here is that Dockerfile is another language to learn and another file to maintain, and the Docker build context works poorly with development build systems. And what I mean here is when you well, I'll just go into when you go into, right, if we look at this, these commands at the bottom here, that dot is the build context. And then if you have like a directory.build props, or you have some, you have like a dependency that's like a // type of setup, then you're not going to find any of those things, because basically the dot it's like a cone by which, you know, those are the only assets available to you, and you can't // beyond that because there's nothing there. Certainly you can build it from repo root, and then it avoids a bunch of those problems, but then your Docker builds will actually run more slowly because a ton more content has to be sent to the Docker daemon. So so Docker files are great. I mean, I have spent the last 10 years on Docker files, and I'm still quite comfortable with them and a fan. But a bunch of dev platforms have moved to being able to produce OCI images. Again, OCI just means it's compatible with the Docker ecosystem. It stands for Open Container Initiative, or I don't know what the I stands for, even though it was on 2 slides ago. Okay, initiative. Yeah, good. And so now .NET does that. So what you see here is the kind of traditional, the old school system. This is actually the one that I continue to use personally since I'm so familiar with it. But now you can actually produce OCI images directly from .NET Publish. And container images are just tar.gz files underneath the covers. And so the context is in the .NET 6 timeframe, we actually added tar APIs to the product. And then so people realize it's like, oh, now that we have tar built in, we could actually do this OCI thing. And so I think it started as an experiment, and now we have that as a real feature. And so you can, the way it works is you just type .NET Publish, and then you can use these like --os and --arch switches to kind of help to tell .NET Publish what it is that you're trying to produce, and it will even push to the registry for you, so that you don't even actually need to necessarily have Docker Desktop installed unless you want to run the image. It has a bunch of customization. You can change the base image, you can change the image name or tag, the port, the user, blah, blah, blah. And so if you have 7.0.300 plus SDK installed, then you can enable this by specifying enable SDK container support to be true. For earlier builds, including .NET 6, you have to add this package. And this is what it looks like on my machine. Sorry for the line wrap. So the easiest version is you just type .NET Publish --os Linux. And you don't actually have to type that if you're on Linux, but if you're on Windows or Mac OS, then you definitely have to type --os Linux. And then it produced this right after that, it produced this image. And so you might be that's super cool. But we can actually do a little bit better. So I produced a well, so one thing that slightly annoys me about this feature is it defaults to this tag, which is 1.0.0. So it means you can't actually just use the image name by itself. So here I switched the container image tag to latest, which is nice. And then I switched to Alpine. And you can see now that we dropped from 254 megabytes to 122 megabytes for this app, just by virtue of changing the base image. So it's like over 100 megabytes gone. So that's cool. Okay. Thought there was another slide here. I'll just tell you what this was. So you can, because I don't think I talk about this. Well, we'll see if I talk about it later in the deck. And then if you specify the registry, there's just another property to specify to say container registry, and then it will push your image all the way to the container registry. So we could, actually, we could just do a demo on that. Maybe that's easiest. Let's see if, let's see if I can switch what I'm sharing. Oops, that's not what I meant to do. Oh yeah, new share. Oh, good Lord. You can tell I'm not very good at this. Okay, stop. I got it. Stop sharing. Now I'll share my terminal window. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. So this is an app that's at that aka.ms link that I shared with you. And here, these are all these Docker files, but we're not going to use those. So instead, we're going to do, let's see if or I can use, okay, that's pretty close to what it is we want. So I'll kill that. I think I actually, there we go. That is what I wanted. Okay, let's see if this works. Okay, it is working. Oh, okay. I have to log in, but anyway, we're not gonna worry about the login. I did log in earlier, but I think my login has expired. So the main point, you can kind of see what was happening. I think it was good enough for the demo. So what we have here is, you can see that I'm doing a .NET publish. I'm publishing the default container. I'm specifying what my container registry is. I just named this maple sugar, Azure Container Registry.io. It was starting to build, and then it was starting to upload all these layers to the Azure Container Registry. You can see here it was just an unauthorized thing, which is not particularly interesting. So that all works super well, and then apparently it's secure because it didn't let the demo work. So that's awesome. Okay, let's go back to the deck. Oh, here we go. Okay. So that's how that all works. Okay, different topic. So one thing, an initiative that we did in .NET 8 is called non-root containers. So we've actually had customers asking us for this for years. And what they want is they want to make it so if you didn't know, well, let's go into the, okay, I made this cool little image. Should be able to figure that out. I quite like it. So what's the problem to solve, and why have customers been asking us to do this? So by default, container images run as root, which is the same as admin in Windows. And so for like the last 15 years, we have not been running our workstations as admin. So why should we run our prod workloads that way? And clearly a bunch of people do configure their container images as non-root. I've seen tons of examples of that, but my guess is that over 50% of people run as root. And then, so that means from a security posture standpoint, you're literally saying it's, if my running container in prod happens to be attacked, it's okay that the attacker can do anything in the container image. Because they're literally an admin. And then,
Well,
so the addition, go ahead.
Well, I was going to add another piece to that. One of the bigger dangers too, that when you can run as root, as admin, is that a container, there's a possibility of using an exploit that can get to the parent. The parent
Totally.
hosting that container, even if it's another Docker container or whatever, you can climb your way up.
That's scary. We kind of call that container escape. So basically, running as non-root is a defense in depth measure, and so it makes what Sean was saying much less likely. So the change we've made is that all .NET 8 images are now non-root capable. And so we made up this term. What that means is you can configure your container to be non-root with one line of code. And so the way we did that is we included a new user called app in all of our images. And then because in order to deliver on the promise of being able to configure as non-root with one line of code, it means we have to use a container port that's above 1024. And so we picked 8080. Other platforms actually use this exact one too. So that's actually a breaking change, by the way. It means 100% of .NET containers users, when they upgrade to .NET 8, they have to do something. They have to change their container. They either have to change their container host to start using 8080, or they have to configure the containers to go back to using 80, which is totally possible. And so this is a sample, and this is probably not what you were expecting. So in this sample, this is like an app. And so in this app, the one line of code is specifying the user, and probably what you were expecting is for it to say in small case app, the name of the user app. We did not do that, and instead we set an environment variable, which is the UID of the user. And a couple slides from now, you'll understand why we made this particular choice. And it is in fact better than specifying the user. This was through like technical exploration of a bunch of things. So we did a bunch of investigation to figure this out.
We've got two questions for you right quick.
Yeah, and actually this was the slide where I was going to explain it, but go ahead, Sean.
Okay, so first question is there a way to alias container base image, for example, from MCR Microsoft.com/dev containers /base Alpine to just Alpine?
Yes and no. So technically, yes. So there's a command on the Docker CLI called Docker tag. You can you can pull that exact image. You can try this on your machine right now. You can pull this image to your machine, and then you can type Docker tag, and I can't remember the order, which way it is, if it's to from or from to, but then I think it's from to. So then you would type Docker, Docker tag, this tag, and then you could put Alpine or Fred or Sally, and that would totally work. Now, the reason I said no I probably wouldn't choose Alpine because choosing a tag that is a real tag that means something else is going to lead to both confusion, and it's probably going to break at some point where things don't quite work the way you want. So if you made it like .NET-Alpine or something like that, something that was a tag that's not on Docker Hub, because what you want is if you don't type Docker tag, if you didn't do the Docker tag step, you want the from to fail, right? Having the from succeed and get different content is not what you want. Does that make sense? Yeah. So yeah. So as long as it satisfies that rule, then getting something smaller is totally fine. Question.
I got one other question.
Go ahead.
And so this is regarding the use of the new environment variable for the port. So why use a new environment variable? Why not use the existing ASP.NET Core _ URL as?
Well, so that is a related topic, but it has nothing to do with what's on the slide per se. So this is specifying. This is basically saying. So when you pull this image, the one that's at the very top, it is still a root image. The user in that here. Let's do another demo because this will clarify, and this is super important. Sorry for this back and forth.
No, you're good. And that question was just another one in chat, so not necessarily related, but.
Well, no, yeah, okay, but I'll just show all of this right now. So, okay, let's just clear the screen. We don't need all that garbage, and we'll just go there. So if we do this, we'll do a couple things. Runtime 6.0, and then we'll do who am I? Okay, sorry, clearly. Okay, so I'm that guy's a root, right? And then if we do, I don't use 6.0 too much anymore. And then if we do 8.0 preview, okay, apparently I don't use 8.0 too much anymore either. Actually, I do most of my work on a Linux machine that I am constantly SSH'd into. So this is continuing to align with my what I'm saying. We ship all of this stuff as root. So now what we're going to do is let me just think for a second. Okay. What happens if we do this? Oh, right. So basically what I just did is the same as what was in that Docker file. So now what I'm going to do is let's go back to the one. Okay, this is the one where we're not setting the user. So let's do something that we know shouldn't work. So we'll do yeah, let's do something super simple. So that worked. Didn't see any result of it. We can change it if folks want, but I don't think we need to. See, that didn't work. So that's good, right? Now, if we go back to 6.0, this should not do anything useful, right? So so that's how all the user stuff works. Now let's just go back here. We're going to do something slightly different. So then we're going to do. I might have to run this as bash, but we'll see. Export ASP.NET. Oh yeah, okay, I have to do the bash thing. Bash -c. Oh, sorry. No, let's do it this way. I'm not doing it correctly. Okay, so we came up with, so now let's do the same thing with .NET 6. And I can explain this whole thing. Yeah, these are all features I worked directly on. Okay, so basically, as we were doing this non-root stuff, we wanted to make it super easy for people to switch to basically, switch back to port 80. So I don't know about you folks, but I think this is a horrible syntax. I do not, every time it's like this, it's this particular, well, for one, it's like, yes, of course, this is about HTTP. It's like, I'm not serving up FTP content or Gopher. And then I hate this particular syntax. I don't find it particularly intuitive. It's like official industry standard type syntax, but it's like, all I want to do is give the damn integer that is the port. So then we came up with this scheme. It's like, okay, all you have to do, if you don't like this port 8080 thing, just set this environment variable. It is a slightly longer, but all you would have to do is say port 80, that integer. You don't need to know some mumbo jumbo plus colon syntax, and then you can get whatever port you want. So that was the line of thinking on that. Hopefully that helps. And you got a little bit of a non-root demo. Okay, so let's go back to why do we recommend setting this environment variable? Oh, I should have. Sorry, I'm just going to go back to my terminal window for just a sec. Yeah, this is what I want, except, oh, let's clear the window again. So let's just switch it to .NET. Oh, right, that's 6.0. Let's go to do 8.0 preview. Oh, sorry, I wanted to do, what am I? Oh, right. Let's not do that. Let's just do this. This is what I was wanting to show you. Right, so this environment variable is set in the, this is all of them. Basically, these are all the .NET related ones. So we set this environment variable. So the number we picked is 64198. So you could either set app or this particular number. And so we don't want people having to know magic numbers. So we set an environment variable for you. Okay, now let's go back to the presentation and I'll explain why, because it's this slide. So this is a Kubernetes manifest. It's a subset of it. The whole thing is at that link that I gave earlier. Here we're saying, please host it. Oh, crap. Please host this app, ASP.NET app. It's at this particular Azure Container Registry. And the port that you should use is port 8080, and this is running it, and we want this to run as non-root. And so these, don't worry about allow privilege escalation false. It actually somewhat relate, or it does relate somewhat to the scenario that Sean was talking about container escape, but it really has nothing to do with this presentation. It's this run as non-root thing that is the key topic. This doesn't necessarily do what you think it does. What it is a test. It is saying, please only load this container image if a non-root user is set. So here, this is the Dockerfile. It's saying, please use this container, this user that this environment variable says. It's this 64198 thing. Okay, so then, and this is basically the Dockerfile that was used to build this particular container image. And then in Kubernetes, we say, our policy here is we only run non-root container images. And then what this line does is it doesn't force the container image to run as non-root. It's going to inspect the container image. This is a test to validate that it is non-root. It will fail to run if it's root. The key thing though is Kubernetes only knows, all it's going to do. Okay, so here's another, or is the next slide the demo? Okay, yeah. So it only knows how to reason about UIDs. So if the UID is 0 or is not set, then it says it's root. If it's set as a name, it doesn't know if that user, what the UID of that user is. It could be 0, which would mean it's the same as root. So what it's trying to do is literally what the code is going to do underneath this run as non-root is validate that it's higher than 0. And so what it's doing is it's basically doing the same thing as Docker inspect on the image, and it's going to the section. This is a bunch of JSON in the case of Docker inspect, but it's going to this config user field and seeing if it's a number, and if it's a number, if it's above 0, and then that test succeeds. And so that's the reason why we're trying to get people to use this environment variable, is so that they can use this cool feature in Kubernetes called run as non-root. So that's the entirety of the story. So we did this whole investigation, and this is the conclusion we came to. Okay.
All right. That's cool. I got a quick question on that. So with the user ID, and I apologize if you already covered this. So we have more people using Docker than let me rephrase that. There's a lot of people using Docker that don't know Linux. And right, so does the app user ID, you said anything above 0, is the 64198 here, is that an arbitrary number?
It's arbitrary.
Okay, cool. So they don't have to do a previous lookup, they don't have to find anything, they don't have to go create a user and grab its ID.
No. So we did all that. So we did all the things on your behalf.
Nice.
So our runtime depths images here, I don't need to, we're running out of time if I keep on showing stuff. Everything has been done on your behalf. There's a user that's in these images. It has this user ID. We came up with an environment variable that holds that user ID. You don't have to do anything other than what I just showed you. All you have to do is set the user with this one line of code. Optionally, if you use Kubernetes, you can put this additional thing to have 100% confidence. Because what could happen is you have these Kubernetes manifests, and you say, I'm going to load this image, and I trust that the developer set the user to the right one, to app. And let's say that actually happened, but like 2 months later, someone deletes that line, and now you're running as non-root again. And so what this does, it is basically has it in 2 places. In the Dockerfile, you can review that it's being set to the right user, but then the Kubernetes one is another check to validate. And so you have this kind of in 2 places. And as long as the Kubernetes line never gets removed, then you have 100% confidence. You're always running as non-root and you're safe. And if someone deletes that line, then the container images will fail to load. And then that's a good thing.
Okay.
Make sense?
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Totally different topic. Multi-platform. So we got 2 more topics, including this one. So what's the problem to be solved? So we live in a multi-arch world. So I'm running on a Apple M1 laptop at the moment. You probably saw that the clouds are starting to do both ARM64 and x64. And so, you could be in the situation where you have an x64 machine and you're deploying to ARM64, or you're on an ARM64 machine. and you're deploying to x64, or it could be the case that, you know, independent of what you're deploying to, you have a set of developers on your team with a mix of machines. You know, some people are using these Apple M1 machines, some people are using Windows x64, some people are using Linux x64. So how do you all work together? So the way Docker build works, and to a large degree, the container publishing thing that I shared earlier, is that it uses the native arch, or like it targets the native arch by default. And so like if you're on an Apple M1 machine and you type Docker build and nothing else, it's going to build an ARM64 image. Even if it's like in your mind, you want to target x64 because the cloud resources that you target are x64. That's the, you know, Docker build doesn't know that. And so by default, it always targets the native arch. The problem is that if you cross, but then you can say, oh, I want to do the x64 thing, even when you're on an ARM64 machine, and that works. Docker relies on QEMU, stands for Quick Emulator, but Docker.NET doesn't support being run in QEMU. So there's a problem there. And so one thing you might not realize is registries, container registries, they have this special type of tag that abstracts all the architectures. They're called manifest lists, sometimes called multi-arch tags or multi-platform tags. So when you pull like a 7.0 or a 6.0, like all those tags I was pulling, you probably saw they didn't have architecture in them. So instead, actually, they are an extra layer on top of several images. And then the Docker client basically figures out what's the one that should be pulled. And then it pulls, like in my case, it was pulling ARM64 images. If you're on an x64 machine and pulling the 7.0 tag, it would pull x64, which is awesome that it does that. So here's our tag listings, actually. So you can see here, we have the 7.0 tag, also the latest tag. And if you were on these are the Linux AMD 64 ones. And if you were on these tags are all equivalent, each row, they're all equivalent, the tags. And so if you were on a 7.0 machine, if you're pulling 7.0 in an x64 machine, you would get this x64 content. Okay, so yeah, so with this Dockerfile pattern, actually that second line shouldn't be there, although it doesn't change anything. With this Dockerfile pattern, this is just the normal pattern. This will fail. So on an Apple M1 machine, you try and you specify -- platform, this will fail. So what you will observe is that .NET restore, because that's usually the first bit of .NET code that you run, it will just hang, and it basically will never return, which is certainly bad. So then we have this new Dockerfile pattern where you put this one bit of code in your Dockerfile with the yellow bit. That's all you need to do. And what it does is it causes the build stage to run natively. And then you will get code that works. So yeah, what I just said. So if you use that Dockerfile, this will work. And the advantage, since it's not emulated, it runs faster. So this also works, actually. So there's this thing called Docker BuildX, which is used to create multi-platform images. And so then with a single Dockerfile, you can actually build for all of these variants all with one line, and you can push that to a registry. And then this is the advanced version. So you continue to have that yellow line. If you want to produce the most optimal content, you can do this -a target arch. And then this is where that second line is relevant. Yeah, everything you produce will be RID specific. Okay, that was that topic. So this has come up a lot. If you live only in an x64 world, then this isn't particularly relevant. But as soon as you do a mix and match, then you hit this. Okay, the last topic. This one's super fun. People have also been asking us for distroless for some time. We didn't, first people asked us for Alpine, which we delivered quite some time ago. And then the next thing, people started asking us for distroless, and now we have a story. And so the problem with containers is, this is one of those, there's three things, pick two. You know, people are always asking us, like, you know, make things small. We get CVE reports constantly. Mostly that's due to people having stale content in their registries. It's like, you know, they build their app 2 months ago, and all of a sudden it has like 1 million CVEs in it. And then they come to us and say, well, why do I have 1 million CVEs? And then it's like, well, your image was built 2 months ago. You have to like keep on rebuilding it fairly frequently if you want to have no CVEs. Like I said, our stuff is automated. We rebuild images like up to a dozen times a month. It's pretty crazy. And then the last one is actually super subtle. So I'll have to speak to it. It's really two different aspects. So it's really four things, but I'm keeping it as three. One is that people often pick Alpine. It's like, I want the small and the low CV thing. So I'll pick Alpine. I love Alpine. We actually talk with Alpine people and really get along well with them. The problem with Alpine is that it uses a different C library. This is the one that sometimes is called Musel or Muscle. And so that's incompatible with a lot of things. So if you have native libraries, that can be a problem. We had to do a huge project to support Alpine because of this thing. And then the other one is, if you want a number to call, if you want to like a Microsoft-like experience for Linux, then Alpine is not what you should be doing. You should be talking to Red Hat or Canonical because they offer support. So, but if you want support, then you're not going to get small. So what do you do? So yeah, these are the traditional choices. So I just pulled these images. And so it's like, yeah, Alpine is looking pretty awesome. So if you didn't know, our default tags are Debian. So if you pull like 7.0, 8.0, those are all Debian. We picked Debian in at the very start of our container journey. And it's because that's what everyone else is using. And everyone else continues to have Debian as the default. So if you don't care about size, then continue to use our nice tags. If you care about size, then we'd probably recommend not using them. Other than for prod apps is what I'm talking about. Okay, so that's interesting. So distroless, what the heck is that? So this is a thing Google started several years ago. So normal images built on top of a full distro. Distroless is the result of some kind of tool chain that includes only the required packages. If you've been following .NET with assembly trimming to produce smaller apps, distroless is like DLL, like binary trimming on the scope of a whole OS. So it results in much smaller images. It's more secure because it's non-root by default, no shell. So bash has been removed, no package manager. So if someone breaks into your image, it's non-root, they can't like install curl because there's no package manager and there's no shell. And so they're like, what these hackers will do is that their main thing is, it's like, let's go download this script from the internet, we'll curl it down, and then we'll bash run it. And then that script, it's not like they're not typing, right? Run the script and the script does all the bad stuff. And so .NET supports distroless for Azure Linux, which is mostly still a first party thing, a Microsoft only thing, even though our images are public, and Ubuntu. So now let's look at this. So Jammy is Ubuntu, by the way. Jammy is Ubuntu 22.04. So you can see Ubuntu 24 at the top is 128 megabytes. So it's a lot better than, this is for the runtime deps layer. So this includes all of our dependencies. This doesn't include .NET, but it includes all the Linux packages we depend on to run. So 2204 is pretty good relative to Debian, which is what the third one is, because it's the default. But Alpine is a ton better. But then Jammy is even better, Jammy chiseled. So with this one, it's been it only includes the most required dependencies for .NET. No shell, no package manager. APT is not there. So this is our Dockerfile. It's on GitHub. You can look at this if you want. So this is what it's saying. It's running this chisel tool, and it's saying, just give me only this stuff, nothing more. And that's oh yeah, that's the end of the presentation. And so that's how that works. So it's appliance-like container computing. And so we definitely highly recommend this. We released this with .NET 6, but it hasn't been GA. So we are making it generally available with .NET 8 and supported. And so we think this is the way to go. So Alpine is not distroless, it's distro full, even though it's small, because it still has its package manager and its shell and a bunch of other random stuff. We've considered doing distroless for Alpine as well. We'll see how the response is to the Ubuntu version of it. If it's super popular, we'll consider doing the same thing for Alpine. But it's a different tool chain. It doesn't use this chisel tool. Okay, well, thank you for inviting me and listening to the talk. And I'm happy to take any more questions or chat about stuff or do a specific demo that people want to see.
Yeah, if you got a question, you're more than welcome to come off a mute or pop it into chat. There's one question already is Jammy doesn't include TZ data. How do we get chiseled version of Jammy that contains that? Or do you basically just have to grab the Jammy and then add that yourself? And if so, how would you do that?
Yeah, so there is this isn't, so I totally understand the question, and I also know what TZ data is. This issue is about ICU, and it's asking the same question, and the answer is basically the same thing. I think the answer is it in this comment. It's somewhere in the commentary of that is yeah, it's somewhere in that issue. I'll just share one other link that's semi-related. This is an app that I made. It talks a bunch about TZ data and ICU. I'm not sure if it has a better link. It appears not. But yeah, if the ICU thing is not descriptive enough, you can, file an issue on our repository or reach out to me. But yeah, you have to add TZ data yourself using this same tool. So it's our goal that it's somewhat straightforward to re-chisel an image and just add a package on top. So all this chisel stuff has been done in partnership with Canonical. So we work super closely with them. We meet them. We have a recurring meeting. Yes, exactly, Randy. What you said is 100% correct. So we work closely with them. We have multiple recurring meetings with them on a few different topics. This has been part of it. The reason that this stuff hasn't been GA isn't because it's like unstable or something like that. It's because we haven't had a good story for scanning. So the way the scanners work is that they kind of interrogate the package databases. But with all this, with APT being removed, there hasn't been enough information in yet. Rob is getting into the good questions. There hasn't been the information for the scanners to be successful. So the canonical folks have been working on an SBOM story for Chiseled, so that the scanners can do that. That's a great question. It's a very similar question, Rob. I don't know the answer to that. So I would recommend, if you're interested in that, I would go ask that question at this repository. SBOMs are definitely a thing. I'm pretty sure the team has thought about it. I just don't know what the answer is.
I assume an SBOM is a software bill of materials.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
Okay. I'm not surprised Rob gets into that. I have not. So
yeah, it's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. So I'm just looking through some of the questions. So the Ubuntu Chiseled, right. So that goes back to the comment I made about GA. So the Ubuntu Chiseled have now for about a year been in or maybe over a year, been in our nightly repository. So so they are listed on Docker Hub, just in a different repository. So like if you, here, I'll dockerhub.net. I will prove this to you. I have to spell stuff correctly. Right, so if you look here, I imagine the chiseled stuff is there. Yes, I see it. So what GA means for us is making it so it's not exclusively available in those nightly repos, that it's in the regular ones. So there was another question I wanted to talk about, right? So Rob asked this question about, so I didn't 100% answer his question. So I said, ASP.NET Core HTTP ports is the simpler one. And there's an HTTPS variant of the same thing. Yeah, so those are the considered easy mode. ASP.NET Core URLs, the old one, if it's set, it overrides the easy mode versions. And so its advantage is you can specify HTTP, HTTPS, like you can specify multiple ports. Like, you could specify 2 HTTPS ports and 7 HTTP versions all in the same line. Like, so it's effectively a DSL, domain specific language. Whereas the easy mode ones, actually, now that I think about it, those are semicolon delimited. So actually you can specify multiple, but you can't with one environment variable specify both HTTP and HTTPS, whereas the old one does. And like I said, if you specify the old one, it overrides both of the easy mode variants, which was our intended design. Okay, I think we've addressed all the questions so far.
All right, last time, are there any other questions for Richard? Okay. We will go ahead and I'll stop the recording here in just a second. Richard, thank you. Greatly appreciate it. This is great. I love the demonstration as well, and being able to kind of get into the nitty-gritty and stuff. And I haven't played with Kubernetes in quite some time, so I'm actually eager to get back in and do a lot more with that now that I can control that size a little bit better. And I like how we're .NET 8 is going with that. And I know that file size has been kind of an issue, but at the same time, getting the extra features in there, and let alone the security first, I like that. So I love the default of don't run as root, so along with that other protection on that. So and there's less requirement for us to know Linux. What is it, SE Linux? And there's another one too where you can add that in there to help control capabilities in there. And forget the name of that tool, but anyway, so it helps abstract that away from us a little bit. It makes it easier on us, and the adoption of that. So
yeah, one thing I didn't mention is, you know, if you're on the Dockerfile plan, as I showed, you have to put that user instruction there to make it non-root. If you use the new SDK publishing thing for .NET 8, it defaults to non-root, so it specifies the user. If you want, you then have to, there's a container user property. So if you want it to be root, then you actually have to specify container user and either put 0 or root
right
there. So yeah, so we went with the secure. The container publishing is an opinionated solution, and we made non-root the default for .NET 8.
Yep, I like that. All right, thank you guys very much. I'll go. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Questions. I think you meant. I'm sure you covered both of them, and I missed it. That chisel command, that's a Docker provided command, or?
Great question. It is not a Docker provided command. So I will just I'll now that I'm not in PowerPoint mode, I'll give the right link for folks. And there's the link. So okay. It is 100% a canonical thing. If you just look at that from line 2, you can see that's coming from canonical land.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah, and so also then you look at line 13. This answers the thing I was talking about earlier. We're the ones adding this user. And yeah, so we're doing all that for you. You don't have to do anything.
Okay, and that has a link to the GitHub repo for that, for the chisel command and stuff. Right.
Yeah, it does.
Cool. The other question I had was, there's those 2 environment variables for ASP ports, and you explained if I specify both of them, I'm guessing the ports environment variable wins out.
No, it's the opposite. The old
URLs,
one wins out.
Okay.
Yeah, it's considered the
oh, right. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, because it's the most expressive.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to make the most expressive one be the most powerful. And yeah, that's the story.
Awesome.
So Sean was asking earlier how, like, this 64198 thing. So where did that come from? So that issue explains the source of that information. So I can explain this. So we wanted something above 1024, obviously, and so basically it's like, okay, I think the guidance is to go to the top of the range. So the top of the range was some folks told us to go to the 32-bit range. That seemed crazy because those numbers are insane. So we said, okay, top of the range should be 2 to the power of 16, which you can see there. And then obviously, since everything's 0 based, -1, so that you're, because this is it's like C-based languages. And then you need to remove some offset. So I had to pick some offset to go with, and so I selected one.
Yeah, I just put my preference in chat that, you know, if it was left up to me, which, you know, you're probably glad it's not, but I would have chosen Jenny's number, you know, 8675309, but you know, showing my age as well. So
Yeah. Good times. Yeah. Yeah, is that from the singer of that? Was that the guy who was on General Hospital? Or is there a General Hospital link up there?
Oh, I don't remember. I don't know that
Okay.
I don't know that I ever heard that story.
Because isn't it Rick Springfield? Is that the guy whose song that is? Yeah. I might be
according to Gary on chat anyway.
okay. I there might not be a General Hospital thing. Oh no, it is. No, I'm right.
Oh really?
Yeah, no, yeah, he was Dr. Noah Drake on the daytime drama General Hospital. There you go. So I'm sharing super useless information.
So Tommy Two-Tone, and we're still recording, by the way.
Yeah.
Who is the? Yeah, Tommy Heath.
Okay. Or what? Oh no, he did. Rick Springfield did Jesse's Girl. That's what I was thinking of. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, Tommy Two-Tone did Jenny's number, the 8675309.
Yeah, John is loving this, by the way. This is like comfort food for John.
This is hilarious. Yep. No, I'm just thinking there's all kinds of funny, could have auctioned off, pick the port, you know.
Yeah. I don't know if everyone in the call picked up on my incredible humor with the port selection. I believe John correctly picked up on it.
Yeah.
It's like the job can be a little rough at times, so you gotta spice it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, like anything, this was really great to see you walk through it, because like I've read through all the blog posts, and but it's great to like just the commentary as you're going through or explaining why things go, or sometimes just hearing someone say words instead of reading the words is really useful. So.
Yeah. So were there some things that didn't click in the blog posts, or that clicked in the talk, or it was just getting a little bit more, just hitting it down a little bit more?
I'll have to think about it. I think sometimes it's just hearing something more than once is useful.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, let me think here. Yeah, I think just seeing it in context too, seeing you walk through it is really useful too.
Yeah. So as we were building all this stuff, so Chet is the guy who works on the SDK container build stuff. So him and I actually had a fair bit of back and forth about how to handle this non-root stuff. It was pretty obvious how to handle it with the Dockerfile space. And so through those conversations, we decided that it really made sense to differentiate the SDK stuff significantly, and just make that all the good defaults is what we decided.
Are things difficult with like with the container architecture now, M1 and the different like silicon chips and stuff, is that much different, or is it just yet another architecture to build on? Or?
Yeah, I mean, M1 is from the perspective of container land, it's just ARM64.
Okay.
So if you're an Apple developer, then it's a bit more special. But in order for the Apple boxes to kind of be a dev machine, they need to provide a compatible story for Linux. Otherwise, like people, it would be super weird. Actually, it just like literally wouldn't have worked. Yeah, so those are just Linux ARM64 images. They're not Apple-esque in any way, shape, or form. It's a good question. But yeah, that is the truth.
I've been partly paying attention to that because of like the GitHub Action support for Silicon and stuff like that, you know, like what, and just thinking about like building and testing and that sort of thing. So
yeah, it all depends in which world you're living. Like when you're doing raw metal, you know, when you're doing .NET build on an Apple M1 box, then it's more in Apple land. And then, you know, there's like this whole notary and slash notarization craziness. And then, so we have to play by those rules, by Apple's rules when we're doing, when we're in Apple land. Yeah. So actually on that front, we worked actually quite closely with Apple as the M1 was coming out. So we worked with them for several months. And they helped us quite a lot, actually.
I wish I had more intelligent questions, but it's cool.
That's all right. All right.
Yeah. So for folks that don't know, John and I actually work together. We're on the same team.
Yeah.
Quite a bit. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and definitely catch John on his talks on the Visual Studio channel of Twitch, but also on YouTube, and they've give a lot of great sessions on there. And I generally tease John quite a bit when he's hosting as well, and I got to keep him entertained, of course. Yeah, so that's my version of it. All right, I'll go ahead and stop the recording. Thank you guys. Thank you, Richard. I appreciate it. And for everyone else, I will see you guys. Don't leave, but I'm going to stop the recording. Our next meeting will be on June 27th, and I got Scott Hanselman coming up. So stay tuned for that.